I only accepted that dare because I was tired of being the poor girl everyone could humiliate. My friend said I'd never have the nerve to catch the eye of the most desired man at the party. I should have stayed quiet. I should have walked away. But, for a second, I wanted to prove that I could be seen too. So I provoked the wrong man. Nerio Belanti wasn't just handsome. He was dangerous. And when I tried to run, he blocked my path, grabbed my arm, and asked, "You think you can provoke me and just walk away?" The problem is that I had never kissed anyone, and he noticed. Hi, I'm Lena. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Chapter 1. Coins, High Heels, and a Stupid Dare. I counted the coins on the kitchen table 3 times, and 3 times the result was the same. I was $11 short for my mother's medicine that week, and the rent was due on Monday. I pushed the coins back and forth across the worn formica, as if moving them around would change the math. It didn't. It never did. From the small bedroom behind me came the familiar sound of my mother's breathing as she slept. That breathing that always had a thin whistle at the end, which I listened to at night the way you'd listen to the building's clock, just to know time was still passing for the two of us. I put the coins back in the little glass jar, put the jar back in the cabinet behind the oatmeal box, and grabbed my coat. The coat had been missing a button since October, and I still hadn't bought the right thread to fix it. I caught the 7:30 bus with the rest of the city. Chicago in November was one single color, wet gray, and the wind off the lake came down the avenues like it was in a hurry to catch us. I leaned my forehead against the glass, closed my eyes for a second, just a second. If I fell asleep there, I'd miss my stop in the loop, and missing my stop in the loop meant showing up late at the hotel, and showing up late at the hotel meant Mrs. Kensington looking at me over her half-moon glasses, and Mrs. Kensington looking at me over her half-moon glasses meant, in the end, fewer shifts, and fewer shifts meant less money, and less money meant the math of the coins getting worse. I opened my eyes. I got off at Wacker, ran across the street, went in through the Ashcroft service door. The Ashcroft was one of those hotels where the doorknobs were polished twice a day, and where the people from my floor of the apartment building couldn't even walk in through the guest lobby. I came in through the back. It was my place. And I had learned not to be ashamed of it. Almost. Whitaker. Marlowe's voice crossed the laundry hallway before I saw her. Mars was leaning against the staff locker room door, uniform half open, hair pinned up in a messy bun, holding a sandwich wrapped in a paper napkin. "Eat," she said, shoving the sandwich into my hand. "You pass out today and Bryony laughs, and I'm the one who has to drag your body to the ER. I'm not in the mood. Good morning to you too. I mean it. Eat." I ate. Ham and cheese, hard crust on the bread, and even so, it was the best thing that had passed through my mouth in 2 days. Mars watched me eat, satisfied like someone who'd finally managed to tame a small animal. "Gala tonight," she said, crossing her arms. "Italian elite." Belanti confirmed. I stopped chewing for a second, then went back to chewing. Mars noticed, because Mars noticed everything, but out of politeness and affection she let it slide. "Belanti," I repeated, just to confirm I'd heard right. "Nerio. That Belanti." She raised an eyebrow. "Mr. closed off himself. He'll be in the main hall at 8. We serve, and that's it. We serve, and that's it," she agreed. And then, lower, "Just don't let that fake friend of yours corner you tonight. She sent word asking if you were coming. She sent word. She did. Through Rufus at the front desk. Like she's some queen who needs a herald." I laughed without meaning to, and the laugh hurt my throat a little, because I was still hungry, even after the sandwich. The staff locker room was in the basement, and it smelled of laundry detergent and cheap makeup. There were 12 lockers in a row, and mine was the corner one, the only one whose door jammed if I didn't pull up on it. I pulled up on it. I took off my uniform, put on the black dress management required on gala nights. It wasn't my dress. It belonged to the hotel, and it went back on the hanger in the morning. It was a little tight at the waist. It had a zipper on the side that would stick if I pulled it up too fast. It was in the middle of all this that the door opened, and Bryony came in. She came in like she always did, smelling of perfume that cost more than my rent, high heels on the locker room floor as if that were the right place for her high heels, and a smile that faked surprise. Bryony Vale was a type I had learned to recognize since I was 15, at the only decent school I managed to attend until her father decided to foot the bill for a better one for her. She was the type who needed me down here to feel like she was up there. "Nola, sweetie." She hugged me lightly, with that hug that isn't a hug. It's just leaning. "I thought I'd find you here. I just came to say hi. You shouldn't be back here." "Ah, but I'm VIP today." She shrugged, with the ease of someone carrying a golden invitation. "Nobody stops me." She looked around, at the lockers, the cheap makeup on the counter, the old iron in the corner, and then she looked at me. And in that look was the same old thing, the calculation, the fake pity, the contained delight. "Oh, this dress, sweetie." She touched the fabric. "Does it fit?" "It fits. A little tight at the waist, huh?" "It fits, Bryony. It's just that we're all going through a phase, you know." She sighed. "You've gotten so skinny. Is Ellen okay?" My mother's name in her mouth sent a shiver from head to toe. I would have given anything for her to never say my mother's name. I nodded, without really answering, and turned my face to the mirror. That's when she opened her purse and took out the newspaper. "Did you see?" She unfolded page 3 on top of the counter, next to my red lipstick almost down to the end of the tube. He confirmed. I didn't need to ask who. There was the photo, black and white, dark suit, hand in his pocket, looking straight into the lens, as if he knew the lens was there and didn't care. Nerio Belanti. The caption read, "Businessman and patron of the arts," which was the polite way Chicago's press had of saying what he really was. Everyone knew. No one wrote it. "Handsome, isn't he?" Bryony murmured, leaning against the counter. "A sin, that man." I pretended I was putting on lipstick. "A handsome. You know what I'd love to see." She smiled, and the smile belonged to a girl who'd planned her next move before walking into the room. "I'd love to see him pay attention to someone he doesn't know. He's not going to pay attention to anyone." "Yeah," she agreed, like someone who'd already settled the matter. That's why it would be funny to watch someone try." "Bryony, I have to work. I'll pay 3 months of your mother's medicine." The lipstick stopped in the air. I looked at her in the mirror, and she looked at me. She'd said it in the same tone she'd used to say, "The coffee's cold," as if 3 months of medicine were a casual comment. Except she knew. She knew exactly the weight of those words in my mouth, in my stomach, in my spine. And I knew that she knew. "No, Nola," she laughed. "It's a joke, a little joke. You cross the room, you let him look. He won't look, because he never looks. And we laugh. And at the end of the night, I make the deposit. I'm not doing that." 3 months, she repeated. "Due in January. You get until January to breathe. Or would you rather keep counting coins?" I stayed silent. I hated the silence. I hated even more the way it lasted too long for me to pretend it hadn't lasted. "Just cross the room," I said quietly. "Just cross the room." She clapped once. Contained. Easy. She put the newspaper away. She put the smile away too. But the smile lingered in the air for a second after she left, like perfume. I finished putting on the lipstick with my hand shaking, and the lipstick came out a little crooked at the corner of my lip. I wiped it with my finger. I took 3 deep breaths. I thought about my mother. I thought about the coins. I went up to the hall at 752. The Ashcroft Hall, on a gala night, was another planet. Crystal chandeliers with the light dimmed to exactly the point of making skin look like porcelain. Round tables covered in white linen. White flowers with a red streak down the middle of each arrangement. Something the florist had delivered at 5, and Mrs. Kensington had approved at 5:30. The string quartet was tuning up on the small stage at the back. Waiters circulated with trays, and the guests were starting to come in. Women with calculated necklines. Men with watches you could hear before you saw. A collective smell of expensive perfume and cigarettes hidden in the bathroom. I had a clipboard and an earpiece. I had the table map in my head. I had the Belanti reservation marked in a red square. Table 12. At the back, on the right, against the wall, far from the main door and the service exit, with 2 empty seats on each side that I knew no one would take. He arrived at 8:05. I wasn't the one who saw him first. It was the room that changed. The quartet kept playing, the guests kept talking, the waiters kept working the trays, but the air went different, the way it does when the wind shifts on the lake. I raised my head slowly, because it felt like if I raised it too fast, someone would notice, and I looked out from my corner. He crossed the room without hurry, and the crowd parted without being asked. Black suit of perfect cut, white shirt, no tie, dark hair slicked back, sharp jaw, and a way of walking that was less walking and more deciding. 2 men trailed behind him, one taller, broad shoulders, eyes everywhere. The other, older, in a gray suit, walked like a lawyer, because he was a lawyer. They sat down at table 12, and the room breathed again. I was in my spot, leaning against the column on the left side of the room, clipboard against my chest, and I was still trying to remember how to breathe when I felt Bryony's hand on my elbow. "Now," she whispered. "Wait. Now, Nola. Before the waitress goes. I need 3 months." I shoved the clipboard into the arm of Rita, who was passing by, said quietly that I'd be right back, and started crossing the room toward table 12. I knew the way. I knew the way every night. I had crossed that room hundreds of times without falling, without tripping, without dropping anything, which is why what happened around table 8 made no sense at all. It was the dress. The dress that was tight at the waist. It was the zipper that stuck. It was the heel that was half a size too big. It was the hem that was too high on the left side and too low on the right. And it was, mostly, my knee locking, when I realized he had lifted his eyes from table 12 and was looking in my direction as if he knew I was coming. My foot caught on the hem of the dress. My body went forward before my head could catch up. The champagne tray, which was on a side table to my right, was just an obstacle. I tried to dodge, hit the corner with my hip, and the glass closest to the edge went flying in an arc. A small arc. A horrible arc. It fell to the hall floor and shattered with the sound of a broken bell, and the champagne spread in a shining puddle that advanced, obedient to the slope of the floor, until it stopped exactly 2 centimeters from a pair of dark Italian shoes that were worth, for sure, more than I earned in a year. The whole room went silent. The quartet kept playing. The guests did not. I lifted my eyes slowly, the way you lift your eyes toward your own judgment, and met his face. He was on his feet. Chapter 2. Mobster or Marvelous. He was on his feet, and the world was frozen, and the puddle of champagne shone between the two of us like a small, cruel mirror. "I'm sorry." The word came out before I chose it. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see the table. The dress. He didn't answer. He was looking at me, looking in a way that wasn't the angry look I expected. It wasn't the disgusted look I'd seen on the faces of other guests when I tripped on the job. It was a lingering look, curious, almost patient, as if he had all the time in the world to figure out what I was, and as if no one in the room had permission to take me away before he figured it out. I did what any small creature does when it feels too seen. I tried to run. I stepped back, murmured a second apology in the general direction of the table, and spun on my heels toward the column where one of the waitresses had my clipboard. My plan was simple and terrible. Reach the column, grab the clipboard, cross the room along the edge, disappear through the service exit, and cry later in the locker room. The plan lasted 3 steps. 3 steps, because, at the 4th, he blocked my path. He didn't run. He wasn't in a hurry. He just stood up, went around the chair, and appeared on the other side of the column before me, as if he knew where I'd be going before I did. He rested his shoulder against the wall. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, tall, calm, smelling of something woody and expensive that scrambled what little of my reasoning was left. "Excuse me," I whispered, and my voice came out thin, as if it belonged to someone else. "Not yet." 2 words, 2 quiet words, no shouting, no raising his tone, and even so I felt both of them in my spine, in my jaw, in my fingertips. I lifted my eyes because it was easier than continuing to stare at the button of his shirt. It was a mistake. He was more handsome up close than it was possible to be. "I need to get back to work." "Do you have a name?" he asked. "Nola." "Nola." He repeated it, and the way he repeated it, the name seemed, for the first time in my life, like a reasonable thing to have. "You think you can provoke me and just walk away?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I opened my mouth again. Still nothing came out. On the 3rd try, it all came out at once. "I'm not provoking you. I swear. It was the dress. I didn't know the table was yours. I mean, I did know. I have the map here in my head, but I wasn't coming to provoke you. I was coming to—" I stopped, swallowed the rest. "I was coming because Bryony said, but that doesn't matter. You're a mobster and I'm working and—" The air vanished. Mobster. I had said mobster. In the middle of a gala hall at the Ashcroft, in front of the man the whole city knew what he was, but no one said out loud. I, Nola Whitaker, events assistant, in a hotel dress that didn't close right on the side, had used the word mobster in a sentence. I closed my eyes. Maybe, if I closed them hard enough, I could go back 3 seconds in time. I didn't go back. I opened them again, and he was still there, and his jaw had moved in a strange way. Marvelous, I said, in a quiet shout. Marvelous. That's what I meant. Marvelous. You're marvelous. The suit. The hall. Everything. His jaw moved again. And then I understood. He was laughing. It wasn't a polite smile. It wasn't the half-smile of tolerance I'd seen on rich men when they were amused by the help. It was a real laugh. Low, short, warm in the throat. The kind of laugh that creases the forehead of the one laughing because it's been too long since the last one came out. For a second he brought his hand to his face, as if the laugh had startled him too, and looked over his shoulder. Behind him, I saw the tall, broad-shouldered man who had come in with him. The man's mouth had fallen open. The glass in his hand was shaking. "Vico," said the owner of the Italian shoes, without taking his eyes off me. "Don't drop it." The man called Vico blinked, looked at the glass in his own hand as if he'd just realized it existed, and straightened his wrist. "Yes, boss," he murmured, and his tone was that of a man who'd seen a ghost cross the room. He looked back at me. The laugh had left his face, but something of the laugh had stayed in his eyes, and it scared me more than the whole laugh had. "Nola," he said my name again. "Dance with me." No. Thank you, but I'm working, and I don't know how to dance to these songs. And you, Nerio." "What?" "My name, Nerio. Call me sir, again, and I'll take it personally." He held out his hand. He didn't pull me. He just held it out, palm up, fingers open, no impatience. It was the open hand that undid me, because I expected everything from him except patience. I put my hand in his. My hand disappeared in his. He closed his fingers with a firmness that didn't squeeze, and led me to the floor, and I went, because one step after another is an easier thing to do when someone else decides the steps for you. The quartet had moved into a slow piece. He put his hand on my waist. He measured the distance between us with the care of someone who knew the distance mattered, and stayed exactly where I could still breathe. I started trembling on the first bar. He noticed. He said nothing. He just ran his thumb once, 1/2 centimeter, along the side of my dress, the way you calm a frightened horse without speaking to it. "You've never danced with a man before." "I have," I lied. "You haven't. I danced at my high school prom. That doesn't count." "Why?" "Because the boy at prom was as nervous as you are, and I'm not." I lowered my eyes to the middle button of his shirt. The middle button was a safe place. The button didn't look back at me. "Look at me," he said. "No. Look, Nola." I looked, and the world, which was already hard, got worse. "What did Bryony tell you to do?" My heart jumped. "Nothing. She's going to lose whatever she bet." "She didn't bet anything. She bet. I know bets. And she's going to lose. You want to know why?" I didn't want to know. I wanted, more than anything, to know. "Why?" "Because you don't know how to fake it. And the things I buy know how to fake it. You don't. You really tripped. You really turned red. You really said on mobster. It slipped out. I know it slipped out. That's why we're dancing." The music changed tempo. He changed with it. I didn't know if I was dancing or being carried by him. Both, probably. Across the room, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Bryony's blonde hair appear in the middle of the group near the bar. She was looking at us. She wasn't smiling. "Mr. Bilanti," I began. "Nerio. Nerio." The name felt small in my mouth. "I need to get back. One turn, and I'll return you. One turn. One turn around the floor with his hand on my waist." The hand was large, warm through the fabric, and stayed exactly where it was, without sliding down, without going up, without testing me. I made the turn with him, and it was halfway through the turn, on the side of the floor closest to the column where I'd left the clipboard, that Bryony appeared. "Nola, sweetie." She touched my arm, with soap opera concern. "Forgive me, Mr. Bilanti. She has a shift to cover, the poor thing. No one told her. Come, dear, come with me." He didn't let go of my waist. It took him a fraction of a second to decide. In that second, I felt his hand press 1/2 gram harder, as if he were making a choice in silence. And then he let go, slowly. "Nola works," he said, without looking at Bryony. "Nola comes back. Nola, you owe me the rest of the song." "She owes what?" Bryony laughed. "Oh, sir, she doesn't owe anything. She's a hall girl. Bryony." He said her name the way you read a dirty label. "You know the hall girl well enough to give her a nickname, but you've never asked anyone on staff her name. Interesting." She went white. Even I hadn't understood what he said, and even so she went white. She pulled my arm harder than she should have, and dragged me off the floor with the delicacy of someone carrying a box that isn't theirs. The service hallway was the darkest, narrowest, most saving thing in the entire hall. She shoved me against the wall as soon as the door slammed shut. "Are you insane?" she whispered. He was laughing. He was laughing. Nola. We agreed. We agreed on a walk by, a trip, a joke. We didn't agree on a dance. We didn't agree on a name. He called you by your name. I don't know what I did. You didn't do anything. She laughed, without humor, her eyes shining with rage. Nothing. That's what's unbearable. She took a deep breath. She composed her face. She went back to being a friend. "Sweetie," she said quietly, touching my cheek. "That man eats and spits out. You saw the way he looks. That's not interest. That's hunger. You'll thank me tomorrow." She left before I could answer. I stayed leaning against the hallway wall for a length of time I can't measure. A cleaning lady passed by, pushing her cart, and didn't look at me. I heard the music from the hall leaking through the door. I heard someone laugh. I heard a waiter curse in Spanish when he dropped a glass. I closed my eyes and went down the service hallway to the back exit. I stepped onto the sidewalk. The wind off the lake hit me straight on, and I felt like I breathed for the first time since I'd walked into that hall. I kept imagining, on the back sidewalk with the wind on my face, what was happening inside. Nerio back at table 12, Vico waiting 2 minutes before approaching. The question, "Who is she?" coming out low, almost inaudible, and Vico, who I didn't even know was called Vico yet, answering that he didn't know. I imagined a curt, "Find out," in place of any other order. I imagined Salvo, at his side, with that old lawyer manner, murmuring something about the boss smiling too much. Later I would learn I'd imagined it almost exactly right. I would also learn that he kept the napkin I had folded out of habit on the table, with the mark of my lipstick on the edge, in the inside pocket of his jacket, and that, across the room, a man in a graphite suit named Aldo Massari had raised his glass toward table 12, and that neither of the two smiled. But I would learn that later. That night, on the sidewalk, all I knew was that his hand had stayed exactly where it had stayed. All I knew was that he had laughed. All I knew was that, at table 12, a napkin was missing, and that tomorrow, when Rita asked about it, I wouldn't know how to explain why my chest tightened. Chapter 3. The Girl Who Runs from the Prize. Tuesday woke up gray in Pilsen, with that Chicago skylight that can't decide if it's still morning or already the eve of rain. I counted 3 coins in the kitchen before leaving, kept 2 in the pocket of my old coat, and left 1 in the cracked dish, next to my mother's pill bottle. Ellen was still asleep in the small back bedroom, breathing heavy the way you do when you've taken your night medicine too late. I ran my hand lightly over the doorframe, without going in, and whispered that I'd be back before dark. The smell of medicine and still air followed me down the hallway to the stairs. On the bus to the loop, I leaned my forehead against the dirty glass and closed my eyes for a second. It didn't help. His hand kept coming back, firm on my arm, the low voice near my ear, the laugh he'd pulled out of me without my wanting to pull out anything. 4 days had passed since the gala. 4, and I still couldn't wash a cup without remembering the way Nerio Belanti had looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time since I was born. The bus jolted over a speed bump, and I opened my eyes so I wouldn't miss my stop. It was the only way to keep myself in the present. In the staff locker room, Mars was waiting for me with a cup of watery coffee and a crooked smile. She raised an eyebrow the moment she saw me and said nothing for 3 whole seconds, which, in the case of Marlo Kessler, was practically a mass. "Whitaker," she let out, handing me the cup. "You're sighing like a Mexican soap opera." "I'm not sighing." "Yes, you are. Yesterday I saw you look at the reception floor plan like it had betrayed you. And today you came in with 2 different earrings." I brought my hand to my ear and felt the cold metal on one side and the little plastic ball on the other. I sighed, for real, this time, and she laughed softly, propping her elbow on the locker. He just held my arm. "Mars," that was all, and laughed. It was just a laugh. "Nola." She turned to me, serious the way she rarely got. "Men like that don't laugh for no reason. Be careful. Not because of what he is, because of what you are." I didn't know what to say. I finished the coffee in 1 gulp, tied my hair in a low bun, and went to the week's events spreadsheet. The shift went slow, the phone barely ringing and the reservations manager in a foul mood. Every time the lobby's revolving door turned, I raised my eyes before I could control myself. It was ridiculous. He wasn't coming. He had no reason to come. A man of that caliber doesn't waste an afternoon in a hotel just because an events assistant tripped over a glass of champagne. Except at 5:30, when I was already folding my coat to leave. The door turned and the silence inside the lobby changed texture. Vico Renna came in first. Impeccable black suit, shoulders that took up more space than his body required, hands clasped in front of his belt in an almost polite gesture. Behind him, 2 front desk clerks swallowed hard at the same time. He went straight to the counter, said 2 low words to the shift supervisor, and pointed at me with a minimal jerk of his chin. The shift supervisor looked at me in a way I'd never seen before, a mix of alarm and reverence, as if I had suddenly become someone else. Vico crossed the marble floor until he stopped 2 steps from me. The smell of his perfume was expensive and restrained, the kind that fades before it bothers anyone. "Good afternoon, Miss Whitaker." His voice was rough, restrained, almost gentle from being so firm. "Mr. Belanti would like to see you." I gripped the strap of my bag with both hands. Now would be ideal. I have to stop by Pilsen. My mother, the car will stop by Pilsen afterward. He took a step forward and lowered his voice, almost conspiratorial. "If you'd rather say no, miss, that's your right too. Just give me the answer. I'll drive." It was the miss that disarmed me. He already knew my name. He'd just said it. And even so, he went back to the old form of address, the same one he'd used on the night of the gala, without having been given leave to abandon it. A man who worked for someone like Nerio, and even so asked me whether I wanted to go. I looked at Mars over the counter. She mouthed silently, "Go." And right after, also silently, "Call me." I gave in, not out of wanting to, out of the job, out of my mother, out of fear of saying no to someone I didn't know whether I could contradict, a little out of the firm arm I could still feel on mine. 4 days later, the car was black, armored, quiet inside in a way that made the air feel denser. Vico drove in silence through the loop, went up to the Little Italy area, and stopped in front of a closed restaurant with a discreet wrought iron sign. Casa Corti. No light out front, no hours posted, no menu in the window, just the door opening from the inside the moment we pulled up. The dining room was empty. A single waiter, in the corner, and a table set in the center. White cloth, 2 plates, 2 glasses, a low candle casting long shadows on the whitewashed ceiling. Nerio Belanti stood when I came in. Black suit, no tie, top button open, hair slicked down, the same heavy watch on his wrist. He didn't smile, he just looked. I took a deep breath before taking the 4th step. I don't want to be a powerful man's toy. The sentence came out before I decided whether to say it. I stood there, my heart beating in my throat, waiting for him to laugh at me, to send Vico to take me back, to say something cruel and elegant that I'd carry for the rest of my life. He did none of that. He lowered his gaze for a second, like someone digesting what he'd heard, and then pulled out the chair on the other side of the table. "Sit, Nola." I sat, because my legs decided on their own. He went back to his chair with a calm that was almost offensive from being so controlled. "I could have sent the car without an invitation," he said, pouring water into my glass before his own. "I didn't. I could have shown up at the hotel in front of everyone. I didn't. If I wanted to play with you, Miss Whitaker, I wouldn't be here asking permission to have dinner." I looked at the glass. I didn't trust my voice. "You investigated me." "I did. What did you find out?" "That you count coins, that your mother takes 3 controlled medications, that you skipped lunch on Friday before the gala, and that your boss owes 2 months of a raise he doesn't even consider paying you." He paused, turned the glass once between his fingers, "and that your coworker Marlowe hid a sandwich so you wouldn't pass out. I like that." I felt the blood rush to my face. No one had ever listed my life out loud like that, with that precision, without pity and without mockery. It was worse than humiliation. It was a mirror, and he was holding it at just the right height so I couldn't look away. "That's terrifying," I whispered. "It is," he agreed, without defending himself. "And if it makes any difference to you, it's terrifying to me too. It's been years since I opened a file on anyone out of curiosity, only for work." The waiter brought the plates without making a sound. Fresh pasta with tomato sauce, herbs I couldn't name, something I couldn't afford even with 3 months of salary. I ate slowly, because I didn't know what to do with my hands. He ate even slower, with an old-fashioned care, of someone who learned to hold a fork before learning to speak. "Tell me about your mother," he said, after a few minutes. I told a little, enough. The weak hip, the blood pressure that rose at night, the neighbor who shouted in the hallway and made her wake up frightened. I didn't tell him about the collector. I didn't tell him I had started skipping dinner. He didn't ask about what I didn't tell. He just listened, chin resting on his thumb and the rest of his fingers against his temple, as if each of my words were worth more than the plates between us. His silence wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that makes you keep talking just to fill it. I want to help. No, Nola. No, Nerio. My voice came out firmer than I expected. If you pay for my mother's medicine tomorrow, you buy my next decision for the rest of my life, I don't want to owe you anything. He leaned back in his chair. Something changed in his eyes. No longer hardness, but a kind of recognition. A silent respect I wasn't prepared to receive. A half smile at the corner. Small, almost involuntary. Stubborn. I know. I wasn't complaining. We stayed quiet for a while, with the low candle between us trembling slightly, each time the waiter passed too far away to be noticed. He didn't insist. He didn't pressure me. In the end, he asked the waiter to wrap up what was left of my plate, without bringing up the subject, and handed me the little box like someone handing over a letter. "This isn't help," he said, the corner of his mouth going up again. "This is your dinner." I laughed softly. It was the first time I'd laughed since he grabbed my arm at the gala. The car went back to Pilsen down Ashland. I looked out the window. Quiet. The neighborhood lights growing sparser as we moved away from downtown, trying to understand why my chest was so tight when nothing bad had happened. He didn't speak either. He just looked ahead, one hand on his knee and the other resting on the seat between us, never once crossing into my side of the seat. When we turned onto my street, I saw it from a distance, a hunched silhouette in the building's doorway, a shabby coat, a belt too wide. Denny Marsh, the loan shark's collector. He was pounding on my apartment door with a closed fist, and my mother was opening it a crack, her face white. The car stopped half a block away. My stomach turned. "Stay," Nerio said quietly. "It's my Nola. Stay." He got out without hurry. He didn't slam the door. He didn't take anything out of his pocket. He just crossed the sidewalk with that long, firm stride, and Denny looked up and went white before he even recognized who it was. Nerio stopped one step from him, said something in Italian so quietly that I couldn't hear it even through the car's open window. One sentence, two, maybe. Denny backed up so hard he almost fell off the step. He stammered something, raised both open hands, turned his back, and vanished around the corner as if the wind had carried him off. My mother looked at Nerio through the crack in the door, her chin trembling. He gave a slight nod, the way men of my grandfather's generation greeted ladies they didn't know, and went back to the car without looking behind him. He sat down beside me, closed the door, said nothing for a few seconds, and the silence inside the car grew heavier than any words could have been. "Your mother won't be getting those visits anymore," he said at last, his voice low and clean. "It isn't help, Nola. It's a limit. Something I set because it bothers me, not because you asked." I looked at him. I couldn't answer. The dinner box was cold in my lap. My eyes were stinging in a way I couldn't name, and his hand rested on the seat, open, without touching me, waiting for something I hadn't yet learned to give. He dropped me at the door. He didn't ask to come up. He didn't ask for a kiss. He just waited for me to go in, engine running, until the light in my hallway came on. At night, lying in the narrow bed, with the dinner box in the fridge and the low noise of the street coming through the poorly closed window, I cried for the first time in years. I didn't know if it was relief. I didn't know if it was fear. All I knew was that something inside me had shifted out of place that night, and I had no idea how I was going to put it back. Chapter 4. The Date That Wasn't Him. Saturday crashed down on me with a fine rain, the kind Chicago spits out to remind you who's in charge. 3 days had dragged by since the dinner at Casa Corti, and I'd spent each one of them trying to perform a silent exorcism of everything that man had done to me in a single night. It didn't work. Every time I opened the fridge and saw the dinner box still wrapped, because I didn't have the courage to eat that pasta alone, pasta that had probably gone bad by the second day, I went back into his head, to the sentence in Italian said quietly on the sidewalk, to my mother leaning her forehead against the doorframe after he left, without saying anything, with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, one that was exactly the size of a hope she was afraid to name. Mars noticed the damage on my face in the first morning shift. She didn't ask anything. She just looked at me for about 3 seconds, while I poured coffee into the wrong cup, and arched an eyebrow. "You need another man in the middle of this," she declared, propping her chin on her hand at the back counter. "Not a solution man. A detox man. Someone with no police record. Mars, listen. My cousin has a friend. A professor. Teaches literature at a small college on the north side. Never killed anyone, as far as I know. Drinks wine from ordinary bottles. One date, one glass. You're home by 10. I laughed without meaning to. It was a short, strange laugh, from someone who already knew she'd accept even while thinking it was a bad idea. One glass, I repeated. 1, 2, max. Roxwell Bar, 8 o'clock. Dress not too much. Dress not too much was what I managed. The only one that fit without pinching was a simple black one my mother had bought at a clearance sale 3 years earlier, with a thin scarf around the neck to disguise the wear at the neckline. I put on lipstick. I passed on the red. I couldn't look at it anymore without remembering the folded napkin I'd accidentally left at table 12 at the gala. I chose a pale pink, the kind that fades before the second glass, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror long enough to decide I looked okay, and not a second longer. The Roxwell was on a discreet corner near the river, with exposed brick walls and candles on top of the tables that melted at a perfect angle, wax running down the iron holders as if the place were the set of something that wasn't going to happen. Byron arrived on time. He was exactly what Mars had described. Tall without exaggeration, thin-framed glasses, a shabby blazer worn at the elbows that had the honest charm of someone who wears a piece of clothing until it begs to rest. Polite smile, light handshake. Pulled out my chair before sitting in his own. He talked about Faulkner. He talked about his mother, who lived in Milwaukee and made peach preserves every October. He asked about my favorite books and listened to the answer all the way through, without interrupting, without looking at his phone, without that automatic nod of someone waiting for their turn to speak. He was good. He was kind. He was exactly the type of man my mother would have chosen for me if she'd known him before she got sick. Someone who didn't scare you, didn't demand, didn't arrive like a storm and leave everything rearranged without warning. And I couldn't hear a single word. I kept watching his mouth move and thinking about the low voice of another man in the back seat of a car I never asked to get into. Halfway through the second glass, with Byron describing an Argentine novel he thought I'd like, I picked up my bag and interrupted him mid-sentence. Byron, forgive me. I have a terrible headache. It was a bad day to schedule this. It's my fault. He looked at me for a second, his glasses catching the reflection of the candles, understanding more than I wanted him to understand, and nodded with the delicacy of men who are used to being passed over for reasons no one explains. Take care, Nola. It was a pleasure. I left without dessert. The fine rain was turning into a steady drizzle when I stepped onto the sidewalk, and I pulled my coat tight to my chest, the scarf already damp at my neck, trying to decide whether to walk to the station or spend money on a cab. The air smelled of wet concrete and fried food from some corner restaurant with the exhaust fan still running. That's when the black car pulled up. Without hurry. No high beams. It just pulled up, tires opening a wet furrow along the curb, and the back door opened. Nerio got out. He hadn't come armed with anger. He hadn't come in a gala suit. He was wearing a dark shirt under his open overcoat, his hair wet from the rain, his eyes calm in a way that was worse than if they'd been furious. Because if he'd been furious, I would have known what to do, would have known to back away, would have known to protect myself. Calm like that, I knew nothing. You cried again this week, he said, without preamble. I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't ask how long the car had been parked on the corner, whether Vico had followed me, whether one of his men had seen Byron arrive before me. I knew, without knowing. I just gripped the scarf at my neck, the rain hitting my hair, and felt that the Chicago air weighed more than it should. Nerio, what do you want from me? For you to get in the car? Then we'll talk. I can't get into a car every time you stop in front of me. Yes, you can. He took half a step forward, and the rain ran off his chin as if time around him moved to another rhythm. And, honestly, it's the only thing I want in your life today. I got in, not because he told me to. I got in because my legs were starting to tremble, and because I was afraid of what I'd say if I stayed 10 more seconds under that rain with him looking at me like that. Inside the car, his smell was worse. Old leather, something woody, rain drying on the wool of his overcoat, and a layer of something I couldn't identify, but that stuck in my memory the way certain songs stick without asking. Vico was driving. Neither of us said anything for 2 blocks. I watched the blurred lights passing by the window, the orange reflection of the street lamps dissolving in the wet glass. He looked ahead, elbow on the armrest, his fist against his mouth. I'm not part of your life, Nerio. My voice came out muffled, tired, with the weight of the 3 days I'd been carrying. I count coins. Do you understand that? I count coins in the kitchen before I leave the house. I don't know how to sit properly in the chair you sat in Wednesday. I don't know what to do with a waiter who makes no sound. I don't belong at the table." He turned his face slowly, not to look at me, to listen better, as if what I said had weight, and he wanted to feel every gram before answering. "I count men," he answered, very low, "who will die if they touch you against your will. That's also math, Nola. It's just that mine is easier to do." The car stopped at a red light, and the rain grew hard on the roof for a few seconds. A constant drumming that filled the silence between us with more elegance than any words I could invent. I no longer knew where to find breath. He didn't look at me. He continued. "I spent the week asking myself why you run from me, why you run out the service door, why you accepted a date with a literature professor Mars introduced you to without saying it was a date." He paused, and his silence was worth more than an accusation. I asked, and I reached an answer that wouldn't let me sleep. "You run because you think I'll destroy you without meaning to, not because you think I'll destroy you on purpose." I closed my eyes. He'd hit it with a precision that was almost indecent, the kind that hurts because it leaves no possible defense. "And will you?" I asked, without opening them. "I don't know." His voice went rough, as if honesty cost something, "but I know I'm willing to try not to. And Nola, I haven't been willing to try anything for many years." The car moved again, silent, and Vico turned toward Pilsen without needing instruction. The rain grew finer when we turned onto my street, the wet cobblestones shining under the sodium lamps, my building's facade with the same peeling paint it had had for 2 years, and that somehow I could never look at the same way again after he'd stopped there on Wednesday with those shoes that cost more than 6 months of my rent. Vico stopped 2 meters before the door, turned off the engine, and got out, standing outside, his back to us, hands clasped in front of his belt. We stayed inside the car for another minute. No one spoke. "I'll walk you to the door," he said at last. We got out. The rain was drizzle again, a mist more than rain, the kind of thing that soaks you without your seeing it. He came with me, 1 step behind without touching me. I stopped at the building's small threshold, leaned my back against the old wood, and faced him. He was less than half a step away. He smelled of rain and leather. His hands were in his pockets, and he left them there, like someone holding himself back so as not to intrude on what wasn't yet permitted. "Good night, Nerio." He didn't answer. He just looked at my mouth for a second, and then back at my eyes, with an almost religious care, as if he were asking permission for something he hadn't even named yet. "Nola." His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it in any situation, lower than when he sent collectors away on the sidewalk, lower than when he smiled at the corner of his mouth. "May I?" I didn't ask what. I knew. Everyone knows, from the first kiss onward, what "may I" means in the mouth of a man standing at the threshold of a woman who has never been touched like this. I nodded, a movement of the chin so small that I don't even know how he saw it. He took one hand out of his pocket, just one. He touched his fingers to my face with a lightness that didn't match the size of the hand, the history I knew that hand carried, moved up to the curve of my cheek, and stayed there for a second, his palm warming my rain-cold skin, before leaning in. The kiss was slow. It was slower than I'd imagined a kiss could be. It didn't intrude. It didn't demand. It just touched, stayed, breathed along with me, and pulled back enough to rest his forehead against mine and do nothing more. "Good night, Nola," he whispered. He went back to the car without hurrying. He didn't look back. Vico was already behind the wheel again. The brake lights came on, went off, and the car disappeared around the corner before I remembered to breathe. I stood at my building's door for 2 minutes, maybe 3. The rain touched my coat lightly, the scarf wet at my neck, and a lightness in my chest in the place where before I'd only known my own silence. Across the street there was a dark car parked with no lights. I didn't see it at the time. I would learn later, when Vico told me his men had seen a photo come out of it, and a message being sent around 1 in the morning to a number no one on my side had in their contacts. That night, at the building's door, all I felt was the rain on the scarf, and the taste of him still on my mouth. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs slowly, my hand running lightly along the worn banister, the smell of old wood and lemon detergent that had been my building's smell forever. In my pocket, my phone buzzed once. I didn't look. My mother was asleep. Wednesday's dinner box was still in the fridge. I'd throw it out tomorrow, I decided. There was no more reason to keep it. I lay down in the narrow bed without changing clothes, and stared at the ceiling for a length of time I couldn't measure. I brought my fingers to my lips. I smiled. I smiled alone, in the dark, without quite understanding why I was smiling, knowing that tomorrow morning I'd wake up with it still on my face. Tomorrow I would face Bryony. I had decided at the building's threshold, in the second between the nod and the kiss. I didn't know how yet. I only knew I would. I fell asleep with the rain hitting the window, my hand still resting on my mouth, and the strange thought that, for some reason I couldn't name, the street outside had seemed quieter than it should have. Chapter 5: What He Never Gave Anyone. I woke up before the alarm with the taste of the kiss still on my mouth. Sunday's light came weakly through the mended curtain of my room, and I lay there for a while looking at the cracked ceiling as if it could tell me what to do with what had happened the night before. I ran my fingers over my lips again, slowly, and caught myself smiling alone like a fool. It was a smile that didn't ask anyone's permission, and that was the part that scared me most. I got up, put the old coffee pot on the stove, and went to check on my mother. Ellen was sleeping on her side, her thin hand folded under her face, and her breathing was lighter than it had been in the past weeks. I leaned my forehead against the doorframe and gave thanks, without knowing to whom exactly. Maybe to the man who the night before had climbed the building stairs with me in silence and asked my permission before touching me, as if I were someone worth the question. I went back to the kitchen when I heard the pot whistle. I filled the chipped mug, sat at the formica table, and remembered his look when he rested his forehead against mine. A look without armor, a look that didn't match the man all of Chicago feared, and that was exactly why it matched me. I finished the coffee. I put the mug away. I went to work as if the world were still the same world as Fridays. The Ashcroft Hotel received me in the lobby with the same expensive flowers smell as always. I crossed the marble floor with my bag pressed against my body, greeted the doorman, went up in the service elevator, and got off on the events floor. There was a wedding scheduled for 2 weeks from then, and my day would begin checking the vendor list. But I didn't even make it to the room. Bryony was waiting for me in the hallway. She was leaning against the wall next to the glass door, in a cream coat that must have cost my entire year's rent, and red eyes that only a very trained eye could recognize as fake. The moment she saw me, she came toward me, arms already raised. "Nola, my God, I needed to find you." I stopped in the middle of the hallway, and for an instant the old body came back, the body that apologized for existing, that lowered its shoulders and smiled to disarm the other person's anger. I felt that reflex rise up my throat, and I felt it when it stopped halfway, because something else, newer, held it back. Nerio's mouth on my forehead, his voice saying goodnight. "Nola," like someone promising another morning. "What is it, Bryony?" I asked. She gripped my forearm with both hands. "I spent the night awake thinking about you. Nola, I had to come." She glanced around, lowered her tone. "I saw his car dropping you off in Pilsen. You know what he is. You know what that kind of man does with the girls who fall in love." "That kind of man," I repeated, without understanding why my voice came out firm. "He collects, Nola. He collects, and then throws away. I've heard things. Friends of my parents who do business with the Belantes told me stories I never wanted to repeat to you because—" She let a tear escape at just the right moment, "because I knew it would hurt you." A tray passed between the two of us, pushed by Mars, who knew perfectly well where she was going with that tray, and knew perfectly well she didn't need to pass through there. She braked between me and Bryony with a thud that made the glasses clink. Excuse me, miss," said Mars, without looking at Bryony. "People are working here." Bryony looked at her as if looking at an insect that had the nerve to buzz too loudly. "I'm talking to my friend." Mars raised an eyebrow, shifted the tray on her hip, and winked at me. "Whitaker, Mrs. Kensington sent word asking if you've seen the wine list. Whenever you can." That was all I needed. A breath, a second to step out of the old frame. "Bryony," I said, and my voice came out in a tone I'd never heard before in my own mouth. "Come with me." "Where to?" "To the private room." She laughed, uncertain, but came after me. I walked down the hallway with my heart beating loudly, but my legs firm. The private room was at the end of the floor, a small antechamber with green velvet sofas where the organizers usually listen to the last-minute complaints of rich brides. I pushed the door open, waited for her to go in, and closed it behind me. She crossed her arms. "Nola, if you brought me here to fight, I didn't come to fight. I came to end it." She blinked. "End what?" "Us." The silence in the room made the little clock on the wall sound like an entire band. "I know what you did last night, Bryony. I know you were across the street, inside a dark car, when Nerio dropped me off at home." I spoke slowly, because each word that came out lifted a weight off me. "And I know you sent a message to someone. I don't know who. It doesn't matter to me today. But I know. Her face recomposed itself in 3 stages: shock, scornful laughter, indignation. You're delirious. Maybe? I leaned against the door so I wouldn't let her leave before it was time. And do you remember the school party when I was 13? You told me to wear my mother's blue dress. All the other girls came in white. You laughed when I arrived. You said you'd forgotten to tell me. She opened her mouth. I didn't come after this to get back at you, I continued, because I already knew that if I stopped, she'd interrupt me. I came to tell you that I remember everyone. The school party, high school, my mother's birthday, every disguised little laugh, every I forgot to tell you. And the night, last Friday, when you bet 3 months of my mother's medicine to humiliate me in front of a man who didn't even know me. She tried to laugh again. She couldn't. Bryony, I said, you're not my friend. You haven't been for years. And I'm the one who pretended to believe it, because it was easier than accepting that the only person who said she cared about me hated me. She took a step, her eyes hard. You think he loves you? I don't know what he feels. He's going to destroy you, Nola. He's going to eat you, spit you out, and forget you. Maybe. I smiled, without knowing where I'd found that smile. But I'd rather be destroyed by choice than preserved by you. She kept looking at me as if looking at a new version of a toy she'd always understood. And I saw, on her face, the exact instant the old understanding shattered. What she'd do with that shattering, that was going to be the problem. Not today. Today I had enough. This won't end here, she said quietly. I was already expecting that, I answered, and opened the door. She passed by me, her cream coat brushing my arm, and I stood there holding the doorknob for another second before letting out the breath I'd been holding since I was 13. Mars was waiting for me in the hallway. You alive? I think so. She looked at me, serious for the first time all week, and then put her arm around my shoulders. Come have coffee before I cry, Whitaker. I worked the rest of the day on a different autopilot, without guilt, without being somewhere else. I checked vendors, redid the hall floor plan, answered an irritated phone call from the decorator, and the day went by with that strange lightness of when you sat down on the floor, a bag you carried so long you'd already forgotten its weight. Vico showed up in the lobby at 7 in the evening, his black suit, his expressionless face, the almost comical politeness as always. Miss Whitaker. Vico. Mr. Belanti would like to have you for dinner, if it's not an imposition. I looked at him. He looked at me. He already knew I'd say yes before I knew it. Let me grab my coat. The car crossed Chicago with the avenue's lights running down the window like colored ribbons. I gripped my bag in my lap, and Vico, from the front seat, said over his shoulder, without turning his face, "The boss is tense." Tense? That's the word the young lady will use when she goes in. Just so you're not startled. I laughed, without meaning to, and he almost smiled back through the rearview mirror. The penthouse was on the top floor of a building with a view of Lake Shore. I went in, letting my eyes travel over every corner, the dark wood floor, the floor-to-ceiling glass, the low lights, the discreet smell of sautéed garlic. Nerio appeared from the side of the open kitchen with a wooden spoon in his hand, an apron that matched nothing about him, and his hair mussed as if he'd run his hand through it about 30 times in the last 20 minutes. He looked at me as if it were the first time he'd seen me in his life. You came. I came. He pointed at the spoon with his other hand. This was supposed to be a risotto. I approached the counter and looked at the pot. The risotto had clearly decided to become something else. This is a thick soup, I said. Serious. He laughed. And I saw, for the second time in my life, his real laugh. This time he let it last. You're the only person who'd say that to my face. Somebody had to. He put down the spoon, took off the apron, and looked at me for a second too long. I ordered food too, just in case. We ate at the counter, one across from the other, both of us with the same dark ceramic. He asked me about Bryony. I told him. He listened from beginning to end without interrupting me, his thumb sliding slowly along the rim of his glass, and at the end he only said, "You didn't shout." No, it was scarier for her than if you'd shouted. It was scarier for me too. He set down his glass. He kept looking at me. Enola, yes. Have you ever seen Lake Shore in the early morning? We went out to the balcony with 2 glasses of wine. The wind was cold, but he'd lent me a black blazer that I pulled tight around my shoulders. The city shone below us like an ant-hill of lights torn apart by the lake. We stayed silent for a good while, leaning against the railing, our arms touching without talking about it. My father, he began, looking ahead, died when I was 11. An ambush. I saw the photo in the newspaper before anyone had the decency to tell me. He paused. I buried half of myself along with him. That's what I decided I would do, and that's what I did for a long time. I said nothing. I just leaned my shoulder against his shoulder. It's been years since I let anyone sleep in the bed I sleep in. Nola, it's not romanticism. It's that I don't trust anyone to wake up beside me. I swallowed hard. My mother got sick when I was 19, I began, almost without voice. I pulled her out of the night cleaning shift the same day she passed out in the kitchen. I never slept in anyone's bed because there was never anyone to offer the bed, and because, I breathed, because I was afraid of stopping being able to hear her call from the other room. He turned his face. He rested his forehead against mine, like at the building's door. He stayed there for a length of time I can't measure. "Do you want to stay?" he asked, very low. I thought, not out of fear, out of choice. And it was the first time, in 24 years, that I chose something for myself without asking permission first. "I do." He turned off the balcony light with the switch near the door. The glass reflected for a second the glow of the city, and then only our silhouette remained against the lake. He held out his hand. I took it. We crossed the room with steps I heard because everything was silent, and he stopped in front of the bedroom door to look at me one more time, like someone checking whether I was still sure. I was. He pushed the door open. The door closed behind the two of us. Chapter 6. The morning she chose to stay. I woke up knowing I was being watched. I didn't open my eyes right away. I let my senses arrive one by one. The heavy sheet, soft in a way I'd never felt anywhere that was mine. A loose white shirt that wasn't mine covering my shoulders. The discreet smell of coffee coming from the other room. The morning light hitting the wall slowly like someone who doesn't want to bother. And the look. His look resting on my face like a hand that didn't need to touch to be there. I opened my eyes. Nerio was sitting on the edge of the bed, propped on his elbow, and he didn't look away. He watched me the way someone studies a map after having walked inside it all night, without hurry, without discomfort, as if looking were the most natural thing he knew how to do. His hair was mussed, his shirt open at the collar, and his face was different, without armor, a face I didn't know he had, and that now I couldn't imagine never having seen. "Good morning," he said, and his voice came out rough, still heavy with sleep. "Good morning. You sleep like you've been tired for 10 years. "I have." He laughed low, a brief sound he didn't try to contain. He rested his hand on my shoulder over the fabric of his shirt and stayed there for a second, just there, before getting up. "Coffee. Do you drink it?" "Always." He disappeared into the kitchen and I sat up slowly, still dizzy with sleep, stretching my legs under the sheet. The bedroom was large, with an entire glass wall facing lake shore, and the lake was gray-blue under a thin fog that softened the outlines of the city below. I pulled the fabric of his shirt tight against my body, feeling the light cotton and the smell still in the cloth, and caught myself smiling for no specific reason. Or for a lot of reasons, depending on how you count. I went to the kitchen barefoot. The floor was cold in a good way. That morning cold that wakes the rest of the body. He was behind the counter, 2 mugs in his hand, and handed me one without asking. "Black. You were paying attention yesterday." "I pay attention to everything." "Nola." I took a sip. The coffee was exactly the way I drank it at home, only the bean was different, fuller-bodied, with a bitterness that stayed at the back of the tongue just right. I raised my eyes to him over the rim of the mug, and saw that he was watching me again, as if he were still checking whether I'd stayed, as if reality needed a second verification. "I'm not going to disappear if you look away." He swallowed the laugh, but this time, he didn't try to hide it completely. "I'll risk looking more." A click of the service door broke the morning. Vico appeared in the hallway, his suit impeccable even at that hour, a leather folder under his arm, and the concentrated expression of someone who came early to solve the world. He started talking before seeing us. "Boss, Salvo asked me to bring this over today because..." He froze in the middle of the counter. His gaze passed over me, over the loose shirt I was wearing, over my bare legs, over the coffee in my hand, over Nerio beside me with his collar open, and the air of someone who wasn't in a hurry to receive visitors. Vico blinked once, turned his body slowly on the axis of his own heel, and faced away with a solemnity I'd only seen in ceremonial guards. "Boss? Vico, with all due respect, give notice next time." Nerio nearly choked on his coffee. I brought the mug to my mouth to hide the laugh, and Vico stayed with his back to us, motionless, the folder pressed under his arm, waiting for an order with the posture of someone who had decided that this moment had not happened. "Leave the folder on the living room table," Nerio said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Go and have some coffee." On the other side of the apartment, with your permission." He disappeared down the hallway with the folder under his arm, and the dignity intact of someone who had seen the Pope in his pajamas and chosen not to comment. I rested my forehead against Nerio's shoulder so I wouldn't laugh out loud, and he rested his chin on the top of my head without saying anything for a while, just his contained laughter vibrating slowly in his chest. "This is going to become a household story," I said. "It already has." After the coffee, he sat me down on the living room sofa and brought over the folder Vico had left on the table. His face changed again. It didn't go back to being the usual hard face, but it gained a seriousness the morning hadn't yet seen, a concentration he didn't try to disguise. He set the folder on my lap before opening it. "Before I open it, I want to tell you with my own voice." I held his elbow. "Tell me." Aldo Massari was seen near the Ashcroft 3 times in the last week. Last night, when Bryony left that private room, she didn't go home. He paused briefly, choosing his words carefully. "She went to meet someone at a restaurant that isn't her world. My men couldn't see who, but the car parked next to hers had a Massari plate. I felt the coffee go down wrong. I gripped the fabric of the sofa under my fingers, feeling the rough texture of the wool against my fingertips, as if I needed something solid. "She sent a message last night, from across the street from my house," I said. "I saw the notification on my phone when I got into the elevator. I didn't open it." He looked at me, and his gaze hardened at exactly the point where it always hardened before a heavy decision, that line in his jaw that appeared like a warning. "Nola, Nerio, I can handle this today." I raised my eyes to him. "The way you want, or the way I need." He stayed silent for a while. I saw his jaw lock, release, lock again, and I saw, for the first time in our short history, the instant when he chose to listen instead of act. "Explain," he asked. "I want proof, not revenge. If you kill someone now, Aldo gets a martyr, and Bryony gets the right to say we were what she always said we were. If you arrest, if you turn him in, if you expose him, no one can say anything. And I breathed deep, slowly. "I don't want to be the woman who made you become what you don't want to be." He looked at me for a length of time the morning couldn't measure. "Do you realize no one has ever spoken to me like this?" "I do." "Do you realize I could get angry?" "I do too." He brought his hand to the nape of my neck, slowly, rested his forehead against mine, and closed his eyes. I felt his weight give a little, that resistance he carried in his shoulders loosening just enough for me to notice. "All right, Nola." It was the first time, in many years of his life, that he gave in. At noon we were at Salvo Corti's office, an entire floor in an expensive building in the Loop, with dark wood shelves, yellow light from old lamps, and the sweet smell of old cigars soaked into the walls and the lining of the armchairs. Salvo was a thin man, in a well-pressed gray suit, with thick eyebrows he raised like someone making a cat's face. A tool, I realized, he used in place of words whenever he could. He raised one of them the moment I walked in behind Nerio. "Boss." "Salvo." "Ma'am." "Nola works." He almost laughed, and I already liked him. Nerio sat in the armchair on the other side of the desk and rested his elbows on his knees with the posture of someone who doesn't need a boss's chair to fill the space. "From today on, any decision involving Nola or her mother goes through her before it goes through me." Salvo raised the other eyebrow. Both stayed up for 3 whole seconds, which I imagined was his version of absolute astonishment. "You're asking me to formalize this in the internal protocol." "I am." "Boss, you're smiling again. You're scaring me." "Formalize it, Salvo." The consigliere wrote something in a leather-bound notebook, in that small, precise handwriting of someone who learned to write when writing was still a serious thing. Then he looked at me. "I'll treat you as part of the office from now on. Nola, if you need me, the number Vico will give you rings here 24 hours a day. Thank you." Vico, leaning against the door with his arms crossed, nodded and didn't look at Nerio. He was, evidently, still in the process of recovering from the kitchen. We left the office with the late afternoon sun already low, the orange light cutting diagonally across the Loop's buildings and casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Nerio drove the car himself this time, one hand on the wheel, and the other resting on my knee with the naturalness of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, and we crossed the city barely speaking. He took me to the Ashcroft, not through the service entrance, through the main door. I stopped in the middle of the marble lobby. "Nerio, come. I work here." "Not today." He pressed the button for the panoramic elevator, the one that only went up to the rooftop and that I'd seen the inside of only once in my life, when I helped set up a party that wasn't for me and had to carry boxes up there without stopping to look at the view. The door opened with a soft sound. We went up in silence. On the other side of the glass, Chicago grew small, the cars turning into dots, the lake opening like an immense gray mirror, and I gripped his hand without asking permission. The rooftop was empty, just the two of us, the wind and the city descending into night. He walked to the edge with that slow stride of someone who's in no hurry to get anywhere. I followed. He rested his elbows on the concrete parapet and looked ahead for a long time, his profile cut against the sky that was beginning to turn purple at the edges, before he spoke. "This is where I saw you walk by for the first time, you know? Here. On a Friday morning, weeks before the gala, you were checking a list with Adler, with a sandwich in your hand that Marlowe had given you. I came up for a meeting with the manager. You didn't see me. I saw you. You never told me. I couldn't have. I was still the man who didn't tell that kind of thing." I leaned beside him, elbow on the parapet, with the wind coming off the lake and bringing the smell of cold water mixed with the dry air of late afternoon. Inside, I felt a stillness I didn't know existed. "I don't know how to make a pretty promise, Nola," he said, without looking at me, his eyes still on the city. "I never learned. What I know how to do is keep one." He turned his face to me. "No one else will look down on you while I'm standing." I held his hand on top of the parapet, his fingers wrapping around mine with a firm, quiet pressure. "Just don't look down on me either." He laughed. Second time in years, and I was already counting the two as if they were rare things you keep. We stayed there a while without speaking. The sun hid behind the buildings on the other side of the lake, and the city lights began to come on one by one, as if someone, far away, were opening windows. I rested my head on his shoulder. He rested his face on my hair, and, for a second, a thought passed through my head. A small thought, a comma, almost nothing. Bryony had left that private room too fast. She never left too fast. She always got back at you, always had the last word, always dragged out the scene until the other person begged to leave. That morning she had gone away almost quietly, her eyes already somewhere else, as if I had stopped being the problem and become just a detail on the way to something else. The thought passed. The wind was good. He was there. I pressed my face into his shoulder and let the city light up below us. Lena here. That wraps up book 1, and I've already finished book 2. You can get access to it for a really small fee. I thought I had truly been chosen. After a whole life of being belittled, Nerio looked at me as if I were the only woman in the world, engaged to the man everyone feared. I finally felt untouchable, protected in his arms. Then, in the middle of our engagement party, my best friend dragged me to the dark corner of the hall. She placed her hand on her still discreet belly, her eyes shining with something that wasn't sadness. She showed me the positive test in the palm of her hand. She whispered the exact date of conception, the same night he swore he had eyes only for me. And she smiled when she mentioned that Nerio already knew. My stomach turned. Disgust rose up my throat as I remembered how I'd trusted him, how I'd given myself completely. Now I face the crowded hall, smile and pretend nothing has changed, or destroy everything right there and lose the only man who made me feel alive. And what if the child really is his? And what if he never stopped seeing her? And what if I'm just the trophy he displays while keeping his real choice a secret? Like I said, that was just a taste of book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments. And book 2, complete, with no ads or interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making, and you're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Congratulations, your purchase has been confirmed, and you now have full access to books 1 and 2 of all our stories, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Everything is available on the My Stories platform, from Mafia romance and billionaire romance to our new Alpha King stories and our spicier tales. This content is ready for you now, with new episodes added daily. Access is simple. Just log in using the same email address you used for your purchase. You can watch on our website or download our official app from the App Store or Google Play. The My Stories platform is very simple and intuitive. Each image represents a story. If it has a book too, just click and press play. Everything is already unlocked for you. You can also add any story to your watch list to save it for later and easily pick up right where you left off. You can also rate each story, leave a like, and write a comment. Your feedback will be visible to all our other subscribers. This is our romance universe, so please, feel free to interact. And whenever you'd like to reach us, just look for the Contact Us button. We read every message, and your opinion truly helps us grow. From this moment on, this is officially your home for romance stories. Just head over to My Stories Romance. And press play. Welcome to the family.